Okay, so welcome everyone to the UK and Ireland Recruitment Conference 2021. It's amazing to see 150 people connected right now, and we're expecting more. So just to introduce myself, I'm Adam from Startup Network Europe, and I'm co-hosting this event with Vincent, who is the CEO of Swyg. And our plan today is very simple. It's a very short event, 90 minutes long, but action-packed. We have opening remarks from Paul Guy from our sponsor, Techfynder. Then we have Simon from Team, the Employer Agents Movement. Then we have Donal from Ireland's National Recruitment Federation. And once we're done the introduction, we'll go to the rapid fire talks, which has 11 speakers. And then we'll have the Dei Leaders Panel discussion, which has 6 speakers, Dei Practitioners Panel discussion, which has 8 speakers, and then we're going to have Q&A. So we're going to open up the chat, and all of you folks can ask questions of all the speakers here. What we're going to do now is we're going to move on to our sponsor, Techfynder. Paul, I will let you have the floor for a couple of minutes.
Okay, thanks Adam. So hello everybody, welcome to the conference. My name is Paul Guy and I'm the Marketing Director of Techfynder, and we're really proud to be sponsoring this event today. So what is Techfynder? So Techfynder basically is a HR tech solution that helps businesses source and hire talent globally through a subscription or a license. For talent, job seekers, it's completely free for them. I suppose the question is, why are we different? The reason why we're different is that we allow businesses and agencies to specifically search criteria like experience, skill set, rates, location, and availability. What happens from there is that a business can contact the profile, they can arrange the interviews directly in the platform, they can communicate through chat, and then they can also shortlist their criteria and review them afterwards. All of this is done through a subscription, which is very much today's way of working, that economy. So it's very much like Spotify or Netflix, and you can cancel your subscription at any time. Because we're kind of all techies, our AI-based technology matches your requirements. So when you actually post a job, not only will you see the applications, but because of our back end, we're able to actually suggest ones to you as well. We also have a hybrid model. So for businesses who are looking to offer that, it's through a strategic license. What that is, it's a veil of a dedicated account manager and a recruitment team. What we do here is we manage all the job processes. We look at the evaluation of rates, we pre-screen the candidates, and we offer payroll services too on a global scale. So our progress to date, so we launched in late October 2019. We're now in over 130 countries worldwide. We have over 230 talented professionals in all sectors. And as was mentioned at the start, we have so much analysis. So we can see in Ireland at the moment, security analysis is the biggest source of requirements from companies. And in the UK, it's SAP developers as well. After SAP developers is very much 5G networks as well. So in terms of diversity, in January this year, the base was at 70% 30. Now it's dropped to 62%, 38% female. So on average, we've around at the moment 26,000 skills available. And as I said, it's a subscription platform. I just want to quickly talk about a case study we worked on with a company called TES. So they're a European-based company. So what we looked for after them is 68 positions. And we had to get that done in 28 cities in 3 days over 9 countries. What we were able to do using our strategic license, that we were able to give them 5 quality profiles for each one. So all positions were filled, the client was happy, and the candidates were happy as well. So look, thank you very much for your time. I don't want to take up all the time today, but if you want to reach out and contact me, I believe Adam's going to send on a message. Thanks very much. Enjoy the event.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. I appreciate that. So now we're going to hear from Simon Bliss, Chairperson of Team, the Employment Agents Movement in the UK.
Good day, everyone. Great to see you. Thank you for organising such a great event on a wonderful subject. Some positives. The UK has seen a 58% increase of D&I roles in the last 5 years, and the UK employs twice as many D&I professionals per 1,000 than any other country, and has the second largest number of D&I professionals globally behind the USA. But if we look at tech boards, 2.6% of UK tech boards are ethnic minorities. 78% of large UK companies pay men more than women, and no sector in the UK pays women more than men. At Team, I'll just give you a little background to us. We support our 500 independent recruitment companies achieve their goals. We collaborate with jobs to share millions of pounds on roles that members cannot fill on their own. And we run L&D programs for business owners and their staff and have DEI webinars in our portfolio. The UK recruitment industry, I think, has a huge opportunity to lead the way for DEI for its own staff and to lead by example to its clients too. We've encouraged all our members to add, what is your DEI policy to every job qualification discussion and advise clients who haven't yet embraced the subject. In a market that's now job rich and candidate poor, which is the feedback I get from my members, this is a real opportunity for forward thinking organisations to expand their talent pools and directly to include the wealth of talent with ethnic minorities, women in the workplace, disability, employment, low paid workers, older workers, and also those with criminal records. I got two great examples of members of mine who have embraced this challenge full on. One is a lady from an ethnic background who specialises now in placing Bame female professionals globally, all on retained. She picks and chooses her roles. Another member who works with the ex-convict community to get them back into society. Of the ex-convict community who gain full-time employment within 3 months of release, 90% don't reoffend, if the alternative reverses on that figure. So I'd say it's up to us, recruiters, to lead the way. Come on, recruiters in UK and Ireland, what can you do? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. And now we're going to hear from Donal Donahue, who is president of the National Recruitment Federation of Ireland. He's also a managing director at Sanderson.
Thanks, Adam, and good morning, everybody. It's great to see so many people here to share experience and knowledge on what is a very, very important topic. So as Adam said, I'm Donal O'Donoghue. I'm president of the National Recruitment Federation in Ireland, and we are the body that, the membership body that looks after over 200 recruitment companies and employment agencies in Ireland. So diversity, equity and inclusion is one of our top agenda items at the moment. So for my very brief snippet today, I just want to leave one thought with you, and that is about our role. And the role of a recruiter, whether agency or in-house, talent acquisition or HR professional. In the past, we were often seen as gatekeepers to the talent doorway in an organization. And I think now we are well into our journey to be seen as labour market enablers. We help people to access meaningful work, whether permanent employment, temporary agency work, or work as professional contractors. And in this role, we've got a real chance to be advocates for underrepresented groups. So I think what we need to do is make sure that we are pipelining and building talent pipelines from underrepresented groups. And the way to do that is to start with our own unconscious bias, which by definition is challenging because our unconscious bias are the deeply held stereotypes that we're not consciously aware of. In terms of building our talent streams from underrepresented groups, that's a good place to start, but it's not enough. We also have to take very seriously our role to make sure that when we're bringing diverse talent into an organization at recruitment stage, that we're seeing that fair and objective hiring decisions are being made. So we also need to make sure that we're empowered and that we empower our colleagues to positively challenge decisions where we see bias, whether that's a hiring manager or whether that's a client organization. I think that's vitally important. And the old thing of what's the line that we used to hear, if somebody wasn't the right culture fit, how laden with bias is that? We have to move away from people talking about fitting with the culture to adding to the culture. So the one takeaway from my couple of minutes, I would like us to all think about moving from culture fit to culture add, and becoming champions for underrepresented groups, for gender balance, for closing the gender pay gap, for diversity of experience, for diversity of thought, and for cognitive diversity. So being here today, I think, is a great place to start. I think it shows that momentum is building to build inclusive and diverse organizations. So I'm definitely looking forward to hearing the other speakers and seeing the difference that we all can collectively make on our workplaces and our communities. So thank you all, and I look forward to hearing from you all later.
Guys, now we're going to go on to the rapid fire talk section of this event, which is going to be moderated by Vincent of Swyg. Very exciting. It's going to be 1 minute 40 seconds, I hope, from each speaker. And we have 11 speakers in total. Vincent, I'll let you take it from here.
Thanks very much, Adam. So Adam already explained roughly what's going to happen. So we're going to have back-to-back talks that are each individually quite short. We're aiming for 1 minute 40 seconds. And I'll introduce everybody by name. And then please start your talk. Then I'll let you know if you're going over time. But I don't have the power to cut you off. So please be respectful of the time limit. Everybody in this section will be addressing the same question, which is, what is the best DEI practice you've implemented this year? First up is Theresa. She's the Global Head of Diversity and Inclusion at BAE Systems Applied Intelligence. Theresa, the floor is yours.
Well, hello, welcome everyone. Yeah, this is really exciting, and I'm on the clock, so I'm feeling really, really nervous. What is the best initiative that we've implemented this year? You sort of heard it. Simon and Ronald tickled on it a bit. Simon talked a bit about data, and Ronald talked about our role and being enablers. And so at Applied Intelligence this year, previous to this, we were actually a bit behind the curve with regards to collecting data. And so for us, our single-handed most strategic delivery we're going to do into the business this year is the collection of self-identification data. It's a massive undertaking. It's one that you may or may not be. You probably hopefully are aware of it because it can be used so well in recruitment. What it is, for anyone who doesn't know, is self-identification at its core is the assigning of particular characteristics or categorizations to oneself, right? So that's us. When it comes to then being a business, how do we use it? It's the collection of the data and the use of it as a tool to help your organization to understand itself and to measure its progress through the entire employee life cycle. And that starts at recruitment. It's one of the, as we've been saying, it's one of the biggest things you can do is put that gateway at the front door and make sure that you're being as equitable as possible. Some of the key benefits that you start to see with it are identifying and removing barriers, things we've already talked about for historically underrepresented or disadvantaged groups, ensuring a more equitable workplace, consistent evolution and inclusive innovation for your policies, practices, processes, recruitment. We see it all the time. Things to be careful and to take seriously. The legislation and regulation is country by country. Make sure you do your due diligence on this. When we talk about these categories, the things we're talking about are things like gender identity, sex assigned at birth, sexual orientation, disability, faith and belief systems, but it can extend into areas such as carers. It's about what sort of data are you going to collect and what are you going to do with it? That should always be the question. Don't just collect it and house it. What are you going to do with it? How are we going to go make our place better? So that obviously brings into data security, data storage, confidentiality. Take your time in how you develop and launch it. Employees will be scared, quite frankly, about it. Plan out your communication strategy, upskill your leaders and managers. And then I always say the best advice on what to do with the data is use it. I've already said it. Use it. Take positive actions with it. And then tell people what you're doing with it. Show them how you're using it. Give them comfort. Use it well and let them know that disclosing helped them.
Thank you, Theresa, for those wonderful comments. So next up is Leyla. She's the founder and CEO of KPesa and YourY Network. Leyla, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here. So we are a new organization, and what we're trying to build this diversity and equality and inclusion in our core values. And we're trying to be more conscious with our unconscious bias. I think we all have unconscious bias, and the thing is just to be conscious, aware of that, and try to implement everything in within diversity and inclusion things. So yeah, that's what we do. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Leyla. Next up is Laura. She's the founder and managing director at Pink Polar Bear, Training and Consultancy.
Thank you, Vincent, and thank you for having me at the conference. Over the last year, I have been on the steepest learning curve of my life, setting up my own business in diversity and inclusion training, but also in self-discovery of my lack of knowing what it's like to be in another person's shoes. I have never been one to play the pretense game, so I knew that there would be a lot to learn, and I certainly knew I did not know everything about diversity and inclusion. But I didn't realize until 2020 what I needed to do about it. Over the last year, I have decided to put my money where my mouth is. Yes, I have felt part of diversity and inclusion community. For instance, I've worked voluntarily with LGBT groups in schools for almost 10 years, but I did not delve deeply enough. I did not look at my surroundings and ask the hard questions. Do I really know what it's like to be a person of colour in a country where we shy away from race issues at every turn because it's so uncomfortable? In my line of work, I often get asked, how can people be more inclusive? And I tell them, look at your surroundings. Are you surrounded by people who look like you? Do you have friends that are disabled or on the spectrum? Do you have friends or genuine connections that are different races, ethnicities, religions? If the answer is no, then what are you going to do to change your mindset? So over the past year, I have reached out. I have decided, as a member of the LGBT community who knows a lot about disability because of my family situation, that I actually know very little of what it is like. I decided to connect with people who know, because I don't. And it has not been easy being told, oh, that's great, you are in D&I, but have you truly got a sense of racism in Ireland? I am connecting with people who are not like me so that I can fully understand and how to advocate for them. Sometimes words just aren't enough. So I am choosing to put my money where my mouth is, and I urge you to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. That was insightful and inspiring. So next up is Julianne. She's the CEO and co-founder of Women Returners.
Thank you, Vincent, and good morning, everybody. Well, back in 2014, I co-founded Women Returners. We're a consulting, coaching and networking organisation that enables professionals to get back into the workforce after breaks of 2 to 15 or more years. We run the Women Returners Professional Network. We've now got 6,500 women in it, and we've partnered with over 100 employers on creating returner programmes. We have a mission. Our mission is to remove the career break penalty, and that comes from the recruitment bias, probably many of you have, against people without recent experience. So the best DEI initiative I've implemented this year is a returnship. It's a supported route back to work for career returners. They are a fantastic talent pool if you're looking for diverse hires, diversity of gender, 90% or so are women, diversity of age, experience, ethnicity, really true cognitive diversity. People will bring a fresh perspective to your teams. And most importantly, they're really highly qualified and experienced, and they're ready to join an organisation in mid to senior levels. They just need a bit more time to get back up to speed. So as with any form of diversity, you do need to do things differently to attract and retain returners. A returnship's a great way to start. It's a paid 3 to 6 month work placement with coaching, training, and a high likelihood of a permanent role at the end. It gives both sides a trial period, which reduces the perceived risk for a hiring manager. And if it's structured well, 80 to 90% of participants go through to permanent roles. Most of the returnships to date have been with larger companies, financial services, tech companies in particular, but the concept works just as well for SMEs. We now also run cross-company programs in the UK in investment management and fintech, and they cater to firms of all sizes. So if you want to increase diversity at mid to senior levels in your organisation, a returnship is a great option. There's a real wealth of talent out there who you'll never get to see through traditional recruitment and hiring routes. Thank you.
Thank you, Julianne. That's super interesting. So next up is Helen. She's the Technical Director for Diversity and Inclusion at Amy.
Hello, thank you. Thank you for having me. There's little point in recruiting diversity without providing an inclusive workplace where that diversity feels like it belongs. Otherwise, you're just going to lose them. So the best thing I've done this year, the thing I'm most proud of, is the recruitment of a volunteer network of inclusion ambassadors at Amy. These are the point of contact and face of inclusion for all employees. We had a fantastic response. We recruited them at the end of last year. and got ambassadors from all levels of the business, including, and then during the induction that we gave them, we provided all the ambassadors training on inclusion, the benefits, the business case, understanding privilege, on allyship, and how to call out non-inclusive behaviour when you see it in a positive and polite manner. We then empowered the ambassadors to take that training out to their local teams and get the conversation really going across the business. The ambassadors also support our employee networks and any corporate campaigns that we run, and including like Mental Health Week this week, Mental Health Awareness Week. They signpost resources and events, and they've really enhanced the employee engagement across our business, which is quite a large business. There's 14,000 of us. The network has also been great for the individual ambassadors, instilling confidence and practice in public speaking, in posting on social media, all these skills that nobody likes to do, and enhancing the visibility of those individuals and letting them build network across the business units. As an unexpected bonus, the network has provided a safe space where issues may be raised without judgment. The ambassadors have got to know one another really well, and they trust one another. So we've been able to listen and learn so much about the lived experience of our diverse employees, which has helped inform our inclusion strategy going forward.
Thank you, Helen.
So so I'm Andy Randall, and I'm the CEO of Arcu. So we provide technology for the in-house resourcing market. Working with our clients over the last several years and with leading diversity organisations, we've put together to build a product called AdPro. And AdPro is really something that looks at job adverts that are being used by clients, and in particular looks to optimise their effect in attracting people from minority groups. And so in particular looking at things like gender bias and making sure there are no terms that will put women off from applying, but also more recently with the Black Lives Matter global campaign, look at insensitive terms and phrases that actually can put ethnic minorities off from applying for vacancies. So the idea really is to look at these job adverts and to strip out these terms, to suggest alternatives that are more inclusive terms, and therefore to make sure that not only there's a diversity statement or policy that's declared, but actually the actions and the processes that are followed by clients and advertising their jobs will actually deliver a diverse range of applicants that can be considered and taken through the process. So one of the things we're doing to support this is to build a checklist. So you'd be welcome to have a copy of that. That'll be coming out in the next few weeks, which allows organisations to assess how well they're covering all the multiple dimensions of diversity, and can actively see on a continuum how far they've got through trying to optimise their approach. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy, and apologies for mispronouncing your company name, and thank you for correcting me. Next up is Chicory, founder of Inclusive and Allyship.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for giving me this platform to amplify my voice. My name is Chicory Ibokwe. I am an executive recruiter. I have worked as a recruiter for a very, very long time. And I'm also the founder of Inclusive, which is a DI consultancy, and Allyship, which is a community for allies. And I think, you know, Laura said it really, eloquently earlier. The last year has been a year of awakening and education for so many people. Pre-COVID, you know, in terms of diversity and inclusion, when we spoke about it, rightly so, it was gender, rightly so, it was sexual orientation. But I feel that race was something that never really came up. And then all of a sudden, you know, in the midst of this awful pandemic and the murder of George Floyd, organisations have had to, you know, have that conversation, have that very, very difficult conversation, a conversation that so many people are just not comfortable having. So I founded the Allyship community for allies to come together. So I'm a real believer that, you know, allies are really, really important. We need all of you to be allies, to be active allies, to use your platform to amplify voices, But the only way you can be active allies is by, educating yourself and understanding and feeling comfortable having uncomfortable conversations. So I guess for me, over the last year, my allyship workshops that I offer to organisations and individuals have been phenomenal. Coming together in a safe space to really have an open and honest conversation about allyship and what it means to be an ally. And it's just amazing just watching people on their journey. And what I say to people is that, allyship is a journey. We're on a marathon. This is not a sprint. It will take time to actually be comfortable having these conversations. So through my DI consultancy inclusive, I go into organizations and I, do workshops. I facilitate anti-racist conversations. I help allies learn. I also run an allyship book club. So I think for me, the past year has been definitely a year of awakening. But I think for me, it has been amazing to see so many allies coming together. And we can see it today, everybody on this call, coming together as active allies to actually have a conversation. You're all recognizing the importance of DEI, and in particular, the importance as recruiters. We have an amazing, task. We go into organizations, we can really diversify organizations. So really, thank you for having me. And that's what I do. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those comments. Next up is Regina. She is the chair of Dive in Ireland.
Thank you for that. So the engagement worker connection piece is coming up a lot, I hear today, and I'd like to focus on that. So looking at pre-COVID survey, and particularly on Slack, it was interesting to see that 95% of employees wanted to be more connected to each other. So this is pre-COVID, and they wanted to be 89% of them wanted to be more connected to their remote colleagues. So that has to have accentuated and increased through COVID. But also we need to think as leaders how we facilitate that engagement going forward in the future hybrid model. So one solution that I engaged with, both to enhance that connection, but also to shine a light on I&D, was to create an inclusion and diversity business resource group in my former company, AXA XL, over a year and a half. And what was interesting in terms of the result was that across the global company of AXA, where people had engaged with I&D BRG, the business resource groups, their happiness pulse was higher than other employees. So that was really, really interesting. So in terms of, 2 to 3 things about in terms of advisory setting up that for success, I would say a number of things. Number one is sponsorship from the top. It cannot be overestimated. And it doesn't mean just at CEO, C-suite level or board level. It also means middle managers. Employees need to get the permission that their work deadline and work on I&D is equally as important. I think that's really important. Secondly, is that the business resource group would be truly representative. And that's obviously, gender, ethnic background, social background, sexual orientation, but also that mix of seniority and junior people. And I would say a third point, and finally, is, a lot of our employees are quite entrepreneurial and set up green committees, social committees, charity committees. Why not house that in one structure to bring them in and give them a home?
Thank you so much, Regina. Next up is Tony, business mentor, DEI champion, and advisor at First Life Group.
Hi, thank you so much, Vincent and Adam, for having me back again. And I've got 1 minute, 40 seconds to share a practice that will probably take you 1 minute and 40 seconds, actually. And I'm coming from it, I'm not actually a recruiter, but just coming from it from a perspective of, managing small teams, large teams. How do you make yourself accessible? How can you create that inclusive feel for staff? And I know that I always used to be stopped along the corridors, and I was always in a reactive space. And I just felt that, so what I used to do is I used to do lots of open doors. So, my door was open 2 or 3 times a week for staff, and they could just come and speak to me for 10 minutes. And I found that in the pandemic, how was I going to do that? So I just moved over to Zoom. I created the same feel. I created a waiting room. And actually, do you know, it was even better because it meant that with the waiting room, people could wait until the next person, the person before them had finished. And it also meant that no one could see who was coming out of the room either. So in a time where we're thinking about psychological safety and respect for individuals and making everybody feel really, really valued, I found that was a good practice, and it increased the engagement amongst the team as well as so many other things. And one of the things I just want to think about is how can recruiters maybe use that as a practice in terms of giving feedback? I know that you get some bad press, you know, in terms of we're not able to give feedback to everybody all the time, but how can you make yourself accessible for maybe an hour a week and just tell people this is where you can contact me and just come and I'll see if I can give you feedback for 5 minutes. It will make the world of difference to people in terms of making them feel very valued. So if you cut me in half, my blood will pour DEI. So I hope you found that really helpful, and do think about how you value your staff. Thank you. Thank you, Vincent and Adam.
Thank you, Tony, for those like insightful and inspiring comments.
Hello, my name is Isa. I am the Chief Executive of the Bame Apprenticeship Alliance. So the question is about what are the best DEI practices we have implemented this year. If I was to go back to earlier this year, we did a workshop with our employers on the role data can play in understanding apprenticeship diversity. And the reason why this is probably the best one is because there's no ambiguity in data. Data tells you the real story, the real picture. And what we do is we use data to better understand intersectionalities of race and ethnicity, and give employers a much more better way in which they can strategize the future of DEI within their organization.
So next up is DEI Leaders Panel. And so the format here will be quite similar, but there's one twist. So in the previous section, everyone was answering the same question. In this section, we'll have a unique question for everyone. So I'll introduce you by name. I will ask you the question, but then again, you have 1 minute and 40 seconds to answer the question, and then I'll move on to the next individual. First up is Katie, trans ambassador at Cool to be Trans. And the question for you, Katie, is a recent survey showed that 1 in 3 UK employers won't hire a trans person. What are they so afraid of?
Thanks, Vincent. I really don't know. That's the answer. I really don't know, because trans people are just ordinary people who want to be happy. And that's it. Yeah, we are, that's all we are. But I'm not surprised that those stats are so high. In fact, I'm surprised that they're not higher, because most of my trans friends have struggled to get work. And usually it's because they can't get past the telephone interview, because like me, there's difference between how I look and how I sound. And often, you know, employers just, they're prejudiced, or it's just a lack of education on the subject. They don't know what it is, and they'd rather just steer clear. But the thing is that employers that do discriminate, you know, could land themselves in hot water, because gender reassignment is a protected characteristic of the Equality Act 2010. But let's look at the positive reasons for employing trans people. Given the chance to succeed, most trans people would give 100% to their employer. They really would, because there's so much anxiety that's caused by applying for new jobs. You don't know what the culture is like in the place you're going to go. You don't know whether you're going to get bullied or not. You know, so there's an awful lot of anxiety. So if you find an employer that is supportive, you're going to stay with them, and you're going to be really loyal, and you're going to do their best work. And also, there was another survey recently by Credit Suisse that showed that LGBT plus employees are 32% more productive when they're comfortable being out at work. So, you know, what's not to like about that? So, from my perspective, I think that it's all about education. I think the more people can be educated about trans and other LGBTQIA plus issues, the better, because the more education, the more acceptance, the easier it would be for everyone. And that's what I can help with, obviously, with my company, Cool to be Trans. I do trans awareness training. So that's me.
Thank you so much, Katie, for sharing that. Next up is Paul. He's the head of diversity and inclusion at NHS Employers. And Paul, the question for you is, in your opinion, what power can networks of diverse voices have?
Okay, thank you very much, and good morning, everybody, and thank you for inviting me along today. It's great to see so many people here. So I am Paul Deemer. I'm head of diversity, as you just heard, and inclusion at NHS Employers, which represents and supports the 500 odd NHS organisations across England. So in answer to your question, yesterday was National Day for Staff Networks, and I was very kindly asked by the creator of that day, Sharon Inko Theresa, to write a poem in celebration of this year's theme, which was togetherness. So I thought I'd start by just reading a couple of stanzas from the poem that I wrote. So together is a feeling that fills us all with hope, a feeling that together we collectively can cope, a feeling that protects us against all types of weather, like flocking birds convening behind a common feather. Together we are stronger, together we are more, together we are louder, together we will roar. Together we are happier, together we can smile, together we are bolder, together we will thrive. So the reason I use poetry in my work is because I think it can capture in a very succinct way the essence of most things. So when you ask me the question, what power can networks of diverse voices have? I would point to these words. All of us like to have like-minded people around us. And that's why networks exist and why they thrive. They are a collective force and a safe space that can, to quote my own words, protect us against all types of weather. Having said that, of course, what we don't want to do is to create organisations where networks work in silos and we just engender a culture where similar people talk to similar people. So we need to do two things, I think, to avoid that. Firstly, we need to allow allies to be part of a network. So this is someone who is not technically qualified, if you like, to be part of a network, to join that network if they wish. So an example would be me joining a women's network, which I have done, actually. And this introduces some diversity and intersectionality into a network, I believe. And then secondly, we need to encourage networks to connect amongst themselves and work together to increase that collective voice. So this includes creating systems, processes, governance arrangements, and accountability lines that combine and merge the reporting from our networks. Can I just finish with one line from my poem?
Sure.
Thank you. So a final line. Together we will conquer, together we will win. Together we will finish what we came here to begin. Togetherness is more than this, a wider, broader church. Togetherness will help us find the answers that we search. Thank you.
Paul, that was actually really beautiful. Next up is Solat. He is the Group Chief Executive of the National Centre for Diversity in the UK and the Irish Centre for Diversity. The question for you is, how has diversity and inclusion changed in the era of COVID-19?
Okay, hi, thank you very much. I'm from the National Centre for Diversity. You might not necessarily have heard of us, but you will have heard of Investors in Diversity, Leaders in Diversity, and Masters in Diversity. Well, we're the organisation behind those. Just as a quick intro. Okay, back to the question, how has diversity and inclusion changed in the era of COVID-19? I think the question should be, how hasn't it changed? Because just about everything's changed. You know, in my lifetime, I've seen three fundamental changes to the workplace. The first has been the onset of internet. The second is the crash of 2008. And this has been the third thing, the pandemic. And we've changed as people. When you walk upon your journey with the spectre of serious illness or death on your shoulder for 12 months, which many people in the workplace have, it starts to make you want to reflect and reevaluate your life. And we're almost on this roundabout, aren't we, where we just continue to work and work, and we see all these snippets and these pictures and things register, but we don't think about it. We have to move on. And what happened last year, around about 14 months ago, is that life just came to a complete standstill. Remember, at the National Centre for Diversity, we didn't get any phone calls for about six or 8 weeks, and the phone just went dead. And we thought, whoa, what's happening here? And obviously it all changed again. But everything changed in a very well overnight. Overnight, it was a complete change. We changed as people. What we want from our managers, our colleagues, our leaders is something different now. We want our managers, leaders, and colleagues to be sympathetic, empathetic, compassionate, kind, considerate, to care about us and our objectives, not just about the business objectives of the organisation, but to take seriously our objectives, our personal ambitions, what we want out of life. And for many people, that's changed. So many people that kind of feedback through the networks that we have, and that's probably hundreds of organisations and thousands of employees. You know, people talk often about how their ambitions have changed.
Time,
okay. Obviously, the other thing that happened in the last 12 months is the whole George Floyd situation. Now that changed things fundamentally, because in all of my lifetime, it's about 40 years, I've been in the workplace, either in the stereotypical Asian shop of belonging to my parents or work. Culture change has always happened from the top. What we see now is culture change happening from grassroots, where people in these employee resource groups and affinity groups are now asking their managers, what are you doing in response to BLM? And what that's done is forcing, right, I think I'm getting some messages, I need to probably go. What that's forcing leaders to is actually respond and react, and that's creating that culture change. I'm going to stop.
That's a great insight to end on.
Okay.
Thank you very much for that contribution.
Right.
Next up is Sandra. She's the founding director of DCU Center of Excellence for Diversity and Inclusion. So the question for you is, when we think about inclusive cultures, what part do people managers play?
Thank you, Vincent, and thank you, Adam. And thank you, Solat. You've set up perfectly what I'm going to talk about now for my 1 minute and 40 seconds. Good to see you. So when I think about culture, Vincent, for me, culture lives in the collective behaviours of everybody. And this is the challenge. The intangible nature of that means that it's hard to measure. And something that Solat mentioned there was around the challenges of COVID and the future of work, and, you know, what's the workplace going to look like for us now as we move forward, because things have just been completely disrupted. I often talk about work and our lives, and depressingly sometimes we might see it as, you know, we've 8 hours to sleep, 8 hours to live, and 8 hours to work. But the challenge now becomes that work now is in our home, and what that has created now is this work intensification. And we published research in DCU last year, which showed that we're working an average of 34 hours extra a month. So we're becoming more efficient as humans, but the challenge is that's not sustainable. So we need to find a new way now for us as humans to be able to keep this blend, which to some degree is actually good for us, but we need to find some way to be able to look after ourselves psychologically and emotionally, and make sure that doesn't have a negative impact on us. And then when we think about people managers, you know, the expectation on people managers now is they need to adapt their style towards leadership, you know, inclusive leadership. And Solat mentioned things like empathy, you know, being able to display more vulnerability, to be curious about human difference, and to start moving in the direction of increasing their EQI. And managers need to adapt, and that's a real overhead now on managers. Theresa Palmer mentioned earlier about data collection, and within the university we've actually built a tool that supports organizations in doing this. So I'm just going to take a quick 30 seconds to just tell you about that. So in Inclusio we combine technology, psychology and artificial intelligence to deliver a scientific evidence-based approach to culture and diversity in the workplace. The software uses science to measure and transform the culture. Some of the things that were mentioned this morning around psychological safety, empathy, openness to diversity. And in the same way that every vote counts in an election, every interaction an employee has with Inclusio shapes the approach to the culture and diversity. And we enable people managers to make data-led decisions on the culture within their teams. They can develop their own skills towards leadership, inclusive leadership skills, and build capacity and understanding on topics around things like stereotypes, racial bias, unconscious bias. And Rajita mentioned earlier, data tells the real story, and what gets measured gets done. And then Shakira mentioned about amplifying voices and increasing representation. And this is exactly why we have built Inclusio. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sandra. So next up is Marad, a Global Head of Culture and Communications and Head of Diversity, Equity and Inclusion at RWS Moravia.
Hi, everybody. Thanks very much. So it's great to be among so many people who are interested in this topic. And of course, we're back to our lovely senior leadership in all of our organizations. And while we're focusing on the board, sometimes our senior leaders are kind of left there. And as Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, when she was asked about the Supreme Court, when is enough women on the Supreme Court? Of course, her answer was when they're all women. So I'm not saying that for all of our execs, but it is something that's really, really interesting there. Such fabulous comments being made, and of course, it's about the data is very, very important. As one of the things about the senior leadership is really when they do move on to be able to hire diverse hires where it's appropriate and go out and look for those senior people. But I think the responsibility comes back to us in organizations and to the recruiters to make sure that we have the pipeline within our organizations set up so when the senior leaders move on, there's a pipeline there that can fill their shoes. And when the senior leaders go on holidays, there's someone to fill in for them, or if they go out sick, there's somebody to fill in from them who is actually a diverse hire. People have talked about data. Sandra had a great talk about there about data before me. Data is so important, and senior leaders, no matter what industry they're in, they love data, and the data talk. So it is very much important to have that there, to be able to tell them in their own organizations, in their own silos, what their people are doing, to have all that information there. So when they come on, you can tell them what exactly is happening in their organizations. And then, of course, as we said before, what is measured can be actioned upon. I suppose really it's looking then, people have had chief diversity officers. So it's bringing that into the organization at the top level to making sure that that is there. Somebody else mentioned also as well about sponsorship. And our execs, we love them, but it's really important to have them have the ownership and sponsorship for certain pillars. And then again, they're very competitive. And it's very good fun thing to kind of to pit them against each other to say one pillar is doing really, really well. Here's the data, what's happening on your pillar. So it really is all those type of stuff. And again, back again to the stats to make sure their hires are being diverse, and also to look at their performance evaluations in their areas, to look at their curves, to make sure all the diverse hires are not at one end of the curve. And that's really, really important as well. So again, I suppose it's just to sum up, it's about make sure the pipeline is there, hire for the diversity as it comes up as well, and to make sure again that the pipeline is there. So I think that's it. I hope I wouldn't go over the pressure of 1 minute 45
Great, thank
seconds.
you so much.
Oh my God.
I know it's high pressure, right? So next up is Alexander, a consultant at Equality Group. And the question for you is, what are your thoughts on ethnicity and race data measurement and management?
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here. So I think that there needs to be more done to capture and use ethnicity and race data. At Equality Group, we are trying to help organizations increase their diversity and improve their feeling of inclusion. And both can be a beneficial result of good data collection and data management practices. There seems to be a real gray area when it comes to collecting and managing personal information around ethnicity. And I think this is partly due to a couple of factors. I think the first is the perceived complexity around gathering such data. And this means that many organizations are actually shying away from doing it at all. Even if organizations do collect this data, not many know what to do with it. So there needs to be a sharp focus on educating organizations. There is also a large challenge around trust between employee and employer. As an employee, do you trust your organization is going to use your data in the best way? Will you be benefited or will your company benefit from such data? If the answer is no, then you're less likely to provide that information. Then on the other hand, are you as an employer clearly communicating your intended use of that data, and are you prepared to be truly transparent? I think by recording this data, it allows organizations to build representative workforces, monitor performance, staff retention and happiness, all of which affect recruitment. data can be recorded at different and help organizations to be more inclusive, be more diverse, and more cost effective in terms of recruitment.
So we're going to move on to the next panel, which is the DEI Practitioners Panel. Again, the format will be the same. So I will introduce each speaker with their name and their company, and you each have a unique question to answer, which I'll ask you as we go along. First up is Joanne. She is the Deputy Head of Diversity and Inclusion, UK and I, at Ernst & Young. And the question for you is, how can I encourage my leadership team to have explicit conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Thank you. Thanks, Vincent. And I will try and give it justice in a minute and 40 seconds. I think one of the main things is really establishing a baseline of understanding. I often talk about meeting our leaders where they are and not trying to take them to a place where they're just not ready to start. So often leaders as well can be really quick to jump into solution and action mode, and they're much more comfortable with doing that. But actually what we need to do is hold them in a space that may feel a little bit uncomfortable and it may feel challenging, but actually that's where you need to do the work to set that foundation. So setting that baseline, I would say, is critical. Encourage leaders to reflect on and begin the discussion about some of the key attitudes and behaviours linked to teaming and leading inclusively. And to do that, I would say provide some practical resources and collateral to support this conversation. So often leaders will have really good intentions, but just really don't know where to start. So be practical as well, and it's important to capture the hearts and minds of leaders to engage on this topic. So some of the speakers have already mentioned around analytics and our leaders loving data. So providing that mix of resources ranging from the business imperatives in the McKinsey report and sharing data analytics to also the benefits of psychological safeties and how important it is to have high trust in organisations. So I think that's really what I would say in terms of getting leaders to have that conversation, is create a safe space for them, make it really clear what you need them to do, and encourage them to link in with their networks and step outside their own shoes and get a different frame of reference. So finally, I would say 3 specific asks for leaders on the topic of diversity, inclusion and belonging is to know it, learn about the changing world around us and educate yourself on the topic of diversity, inclusion and belonging, feel it, connect with D&I and understand their personal why, what is their legacy as a leader, and then finally do it. So adopt the behaviours that enhance a sense of belonging. And really encourage leaders to go beyond where they feel comfortable. Often they will feel comfortable talking about gender, and what we really need people to do is go beyond that and really start to talk about race and ethnicity and beyond the BAME terminology, and really start to break that down and recognise that it is not a homogeneous group and that there are actually real nuances within each of those communities. It needs to be recognised from a data perspective as well as from a qualitative perspective as well. So thank you for having me today, and just the 3 things: know it, feel it, do it.
Know it, feel it, do it.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. Next up is Alicia. She is co-chair of the EMEA Women of Teradata Network. And the question for you is, how would you advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion with colleagues who don't understand its importance?
Thank you, Vincent, and thank you, Adam, for setting up this summit. So my answer to that is that not everyone gets DEI, because not everyone sees themselves as being diverse. But we know from a recruitment standpoint that companies that aren't actively diverse and inclusive don't recruit or retain top talent. So as a DEI ambassador, I start with a really simple question, and that is, have you ever felt like you didn't belong, and what did that feel like? So we know that when you don't belong, that's incredibly painful, you feel excluded, and you're not really sure why. So we've all had this since a young age. There have been times when I've been excluded, and I thought, what is it about me that makes folks not want me around? That feeling of not belonging, of being excluded, is physically painful, it hurts, and we all know it. And when we hurt like that, we don't work well, we can't think, we can't be positive. So my advice to colleagues is to personalize this experience. So like just yesterday, my promotion was announced at work at a company-wide email. I had tons and tons of congratulations, but it took less than 24 hours for the rumors to come back to me that people were saying I only got the job because I'm a woman. And so for a few hours yesterday, my productivity went completely downhill. I doubted myself and my abilities, and it only took that one comment. So we know that this type of prejudice doesn't know reason, it can't see logic, it's emotional, and it's meant to wound us at an emotional level. So to the folks that don't know or don't understand the importance of DEI, I kind of set it up that DEI is a set of tools that we can use at work to address the emotional impact of bullying, exclusion, and bias on behalf of everyone. We don't have a lot of tools like this to navigate emotions at work, but DEI comes with a whole set of great behaviors on hiring and promotion, tips on empathy and understanding, and a requirement to do better for each other. DEI gives us the ability to actively ensure that we aren't hurting our colleagues through bias or prejudice. So to those colleagues who are new on their DEI journey, I say take the first step, start learning about the tools available, and make that learning personal. All of us have felt excluded and experienced that pain. If we aren't actively seeking to unlearn behaviors and bias, we could definitely be part of someone else's problem. So my advice is to learn to advocate for the mental well-being of those around you. And in so doing, you might just find that someone is advocating for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's really insightful. Next up is Emma, the founder and CEO of Talent Partnership Consulting. And the question for you is, what's the impact of ignoring DEI on the candidate experience and the future of hiring? And what can companies do about it?
Thanks so much for having me today. It's great to be surrounded by so many like-minded individuals. And Alicia, I'm sorry about the last experience you had. It's a story that I hear so many times, but thank you for sharing that. So I want to tell you a story. I want to talk to you about a recent experience that happened this year in 2021 with somebody that's close to me who applied for a role in a professional services firm. It took them half an hour to upload their personal details onto a portal. And they were asked questions around their gender, their sexual orientation, disability, education, the type of school they went to. So did they go to a state school, a grammar school, or a private education establishment? And not only that, the occupation and salaries of their parents when they were growing up, which blew my mind. And there was no rationale on why these questions were asked. And even more disappointedly, one day after they had applied online and spent this time applying, they were declined with no reason or no feedback whatsoever. So I wanted to take you on a journey and explore this scenario to really bring to life the impact of this screening process. And I know I've probably got a minute left now, so I'll try and speed it up. But number one, how did it make that candidate feel? Well, there was the opportunity to discriminate on so many levels: gender, sexual orientation, disability, socioeconomic background, age, education, and gender. So it didn't leave that candidate with a very good feeling at all. And I think even if they'd got through to the next stage, they'd have still had quite a bad taste in their mouth. Secondly, how did this experience impact the company? So there are a couple of points I immediately want to call out, and there are many, by the way, but firstly, if we ignore DEI, an organisation's brand will be seriously impacted. And secondly, the candidate pool that we're fishing in an already shrinking market will seriously be impacted. So how does this experience bring innovation to an organisation, for example, when we're looking at hiring the same type of person? And this is not going to bring any diversity of thought to this particular company. Therefore, they're going to lose out on business in the future. And there are now 5 different generations already in the marketplace. And you know what? Millennials, the new graduates coming in, are not going to want to join a business that hires people where they've had this type of experience. So very quickly, what can we do about it? It's a bit like building a house. You need to have the plans and vision of what your house is going to look like. And the same applies to your organization. So think about the foundation, the strategic planning, the framework, building the structure, your employer branding, the windows, how you attract these individuals to your organization, the painting, the doors, the roof, and the landscaping. So secondly, you need to make sure your builders, designers, and key decision makers have the skills to build this process. And lastly, you need to test it. Put yourself in the shoes of a diverse candidate and think about how this how this process will make you feel. Come talk to me. I'm on LinkedIn if you need more information. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma, and thanks for compressing so much information into such a short time. I'd love to talk more about that later. Yeah. But next up is Luke. He is head of marketing and diversity and inclusion champion at Studio Vision. And the question for you is, what were your top learnings from 2020 that you've brought into 2021?
Hi everyone. I feel like I'm going to be doing this answer a disservice because I feel like that question's been answered so well by so many people already. But I think, for us as a business and for most people in the world right now, that diversity and inclusion has shifted from being something that's important, to something that is an urgent necessity for businesses. And obviously due to the global pandemic and, like headlines and social movements such as BLM and Meghan Markle and all the issues around mental health as well, it kind of in perspective to recent years, D&I has never been more paramount to business leaders, which is obviously a great thing. However, the issues that we've found working with our partners is that they're trying to do everything at once, which, they kind of wake up in the morning and think, right, I need a diversity and inclusion strategy. Well, it doesn't work like that. It's incremental steps towards to achieve momentum. And so one of the things that we've been trying to do with our partners is actually, I think it all starts with that mindset. And I think traditionally diversity and inclusion has been very much a box ticking exercise. And so, our ethos as a business is that diversity unleashes innovation. The stats are out there that diversity increases profitability. If you're a business that has a good D&I strategy, you'll be more profitable, you have greater revenue, greater employee retention. So it's kind of getting business leaders and educating them that although this is a necessity right now, actually, it's something that will actually benefit your business in the long run. But I think that's the biggest change we've seen is this shift from D&I being important to being an urgent necessity as it's become so important for candidates. But I was conscious of time, so there we go.
Thank you so much for sharing. Next up is Belton. He's the founder of the Pro Pride LGBT network. So how would you advocate for DEI with colleagues who don't understand its importance?
Yeah, so I have a different answer. So I guess first off is just a little tip. If you ever hear anything that doesn't quite sit right with you, an easy, non-offensive way to call someone out is just to say, can you please say that again? So if anyone ever makes a comment that's offensive or just on the verge, just ask that, because them saying it the second time around never has the same bearings. Now, for others in an organization who don't understand DEI, I have an activity which I'm going to recommend that I've seen work extremely well. So take out your pens if you are taking notes, because I'm going to give you an actual tip that you can use in your organizations. Now, the goal is to try to force people into understanding DEI, but we're going to do that by trying to get them to realize it's about understanding a diversity of experiences, of people's experiences, with the ultimate goal of having people feel included and less people silently feeling alone. The way the activity works is you break the executives or other participants into small groups of 3 or 4. You then give each person 10 minutes to write out their life journey through pivotal moments. Now, before they start writing, you as a facilitator are supposed to go through your journey and share your personal story, but make sure to share how vulnerable you are. I would talk about my coming out experience. I would talk about going back into the closet when I moved to the UK, which was a career change, but make sure you make it very personal. Then everyone is going to have 10 minutes to write that down, and then they share in that small group. what you find is every single person has experienced vulnerable moments in their lives, whether it's the loss of a child, the loss of a loved one, feeling uncomfortable in a certain point, whether it's based on gender, ethnicity, or even being a single parent. Every single person feels something. And by going through this activity, you're going to bring to the surface that we're humanizing our differences. We're trying to say that DEI isn't about a few characteristics such as race, LGBT, or gender. It's actually more pervasive, and it's really to shine a spotlight on all of the differences that people have and how you can address that. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for recommending that activity. Like when you said, grab your pen, I saw lots of people on the cameras grabbing their pen. So I think that you really got your message across, and I think some people are going to actually do this and implement this. So thanks a lot for sharing. Next up is Grace, founding director of the Inclusion Initiative. And the question for you is, what are the main lessons from your new book, Think Big, that you think are relevant for the for DEI leaders of today?
Thank you. Well, firstly, I'm a super fan of Belton, so it's an honor actually to go after him. I think that when I think about inclusion, one of the first things that I find baffling is that we spend so much money on things that are meant to enhance inclusion and enhance diversity in organizations, and we rarely track them through and know their effectiveness in the same way that we would other projects. And that's a really straightforward thing to do. I'm here to talk today about Think Big, which is my new book, which just came out, so do pick it up if you have a chance. I'm a behavioral scientist, and if you come to LSE to learn from me, one of the first things that you will learn is that we have two different thinking styles. So the first is very, very fast, very, very impulsive. The second is very, very slow and very, very deliberate. And we spend about 90% of our time in that fast automatic mode. And the good news for you is actually most of the time when you're doing things that are familiar to you, you'll actually make really good decisions. This is really bad news for diversity and inclusion, because very often those really important decisions that we're making, who to hire, who to promote, we'll do on autopilot, and we'll actually confuse signals. We'll confuse signals that are uncorrelated with skills, talent, and ability, and give the job to people who don't necessarily deserve it. And two classic signals that people tend to overestimate as are needed in work is confidence. It might surprise you to know that the link between confidence and competence is 0.1, so really, really low levels. But nonetheless, in lots of different experiments, the person who presents as the most confident, even though their job might not necessarily require them to speak to people, are much more likely to get the gig. The second is if you appear like somebody who's done the role in the past. So unfortunately for me, I don't look like a white man. So it's going to be a big struggle for me to become a CEO in the City of London, unless we start disentangling signals like whether or not I actually look the part from my skills, talent, and ability. And that's really what we do in the Inclusion Initiative. My book, Think Big, is to try to allow people to actually do that for themselves. There are a lot of people who are underrepresented, like myself, at the top of organizations who don't necessarily have people within their organization to shepherd them through. And what you really, I think, want to do as D&I experts is empower people who are underrepresented to take control of what they can within the organization. If you are discriminated against and you feel the discrimination and you see it, it's a really stressful event. And the one thing I can say for sure that we know when people are stressed, they don't necessarily see all the choices that are available to them. So I think there's a role for empowering people within organizations much more than we've done before, and removing the role from managers. And the second is resilience. I have a chapter in Think Big that speaks all about resilience. And I don't want to start creating employees that are going to actually, work 90 hours and be robots working for companies. But I think in today's world, we do need resilience, because if some of our managers are on autopilot 90% of the time, not necessarily thinking through, responding to signals that don't necessarily represent skills, talent, and ability, you will need resilience to have those conversations. I agree entirely with Belton about his approach, but if you are the person who's been vulnerable for the first time in your organization, you do need resilience. And I think giving that to employees is really, really important as part of our D&I initiatives. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. Next up is Myra. She's Global Head of Learning, Development and Inclusion at Charlotte Tilbury Beauty, and Talent and Diversity Director and founding partner at Let's Collaborate. And the question for you is, how can I encourage my leadership team to have explicit conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Hi, thanks for having me. That was an interesting question because I grew up in South Africa under apartheid, which is systemic racism. So I was quite an advocate at university around having those explicit conversations for equality, for people from different ethnicities, Black, as they were classified in South Africa, Black, Indian, Asian, and coloured. So, it was very different background to what I experienced when I moved to the UK and had to actually get involved in D&I here. So I think the biggest challenge around leadership is in dismantling bias systems, is getting people who aren't directly affected to not only care, but to be proactive in creating equal or unified teams as well as workplaces. And many people are just unaware of those privileges. And that's why the whole concept of allyship is so powerful and imperative moving forward. So being in a leadership role is a privileged position and it carries a great deal of responsibility. So sometimes leaders walk around, with unconscious narratives in their minds as well that are hard to break, like, there's nothing I can do about it, or it's not as bad as it probably seems, or something, that's just the way it's always been. And those are things that we need to shift from a mindset perspective in order to see change occur. And as adults, we spend the majority of our time in lives at work. So great changes for society can begin, within the workplace. And leaders have an opportunity to really model those behaviors that we want to see come to life within organizations. And as employees, we are always looking out for role models to strive towards and emanate. So to have those explicit conversations with leaders requires a level of understanding and education. And this has been mentioned in various answers across the session about the importance of education and understanding. So in my experience, that is the starting point, getting leaders to a position of awareness and understanding around equity, diversity, and inclusion, and understanding that criticality of their roles as allies and individuals who are in privilege, and as cultural advocates towards moving the dial on this agenda. And also, getting them to understand the impact of inclusive cultures on engagement, on well-being, because it's interrelated, as well as business performance. And there's so much of data out there on, the commercial imperative and the reputational impact of diversity, equality, and inclusion. So there's no shortage of information to share the business case, but the moral purpose is just as important as the business case. So I say it starts with education, which creates understanding that leads to confidence towards more explicit conversations.
Thank you so much. So next up is Nagina. She's the former head of Equality, Diversity, and Inclusion at Barnardo's. And the question for you is, how do organizations set DEI practitioners up to fail?
Morning, everyone. Really nice to be here. So I would say mainly in three ways. So it's time, accountability, and resourcing. So organizations have a light bulb moment where they realize that either they haven't been doing anything around DE&I, or that what they've been doing isn't enough. So there is a fire in their belly to show progress. So somebody's appointed and it's a case of by tomorrow we want everything that's been going on for 100 years, 60 years, 70 years, however long that organisation's been going, to be fixed. It's taken a long time for things to be as they are, so it's going to take time to fix it. And there's an impatience of we're going to do all of these things and that's going to fix the problem. And that doesn't work. You need to really take stock, be honest, and stage your progress so you evaluate what's working and what isn't. The other thing is accountability. So the D&I practitioner or the members of the team become the figureheads for all responsibility. So the responsibility is for them to think, advise, and do, and actually they're there to guide, support, and advise, and most importantly, challenge, because I see these roles as being disruptors. We are there to disrupt the status quo that has existed that has sustained the inequalities for so long. And thirdly, resourcing. So this area of work tends to be the poor relation. People don't have any qualms about assigning huge budgets to different initiatives, but when it comes to this area of work, it's always do it for free or do it on the cheap. And throwing money isn't the answer, but there has to be sufficient resourcing to meet the expectations that the organisation has for the progress that they want to be made. And we've touched on leadership. I think the leadership bit is really important, and that leadership doesn't necessarily mean senior managers. Leadership for this agenda can come at all levels. So one of the things that we did at Bernardo's very, very successfully was a reciprocal mentoring scheme, where we actually took our top 2 layers of management and paired them with members of our staff networks. And it was a facilitated relationship where you got a real sense of people's lived experience and, you know, as Belton was talking about, people's journey. And we need leaders to speak authentically about their learning around D&I and how they develop their understanding, so that it resonates with people, so that the people believe across the organisation that we are serious and we mean this, and we're not doing this as a PR exercise.
On to the next section. It's Q&A. Adam, do you want to take over?
Yes, so folks, we're just going to have a few minutes of Q&A. So if you have any questions, just write them in the chat and we'll ask our speakers to answer them, if any speakers want to answer them. I think I'll start. So I'm an event host, but I'm really an outsider to DEI. My background is more in events. So a lot of people aren't even aware of the need for DEI. So if you talk to somebody who's a good person, but they don't know about the need for DEI, where is the first place they should go? And this is probably a question for myself more than anyone.
Adam, Sandra here, I might make an attempt at that because I get asked that question all the time. And actually, one of the things I've stopped doing in my presentations is even calling them D&I. I've created a workshop around building workplaces where people want to work, right? Because I get more people in the room with that than I do with diversity and inclusion. So that'll give you some sense, I suppose, of the challenge around it. Certainly what I find and what I take the time to do is to connect people with it through their own experience and meet people where they're at. So when I think about diversity and inclusion in work, for me, it's about humans in work. You know, and I think if we start to remove the technical words of diversity and inclusion and start to think about humans in work and start to think about, you know, some of the challenges and the opportunities that we go through as humans, right? Throughout our lives, we will all hit speed bumps, whatever they happen to be, right? So how can we create workplaces that support us for who we are today and potentially what could come up for us in the future? So for me, when I having that conversation with people and taking the time, I think one of the other speakers mentioned about empathy and taking the time, you know, to connect with people and give, you know, create a safe space for them to explore this. I think that's really important. So that's my approach.
Okay, thank you. And do any of the other speakers want to answer that question?
Yeah, definitely. If I can come in, Alan, is that okay? I think education is really, really important, you know, and I think someone like yourself, Adam, who's such an ally, I think it really, you know, definitely take the time to educate yourself. I run the Allyship Book Club and we tend to read different books each month. I'd be more than happy to share a list of books, but I would definitely say, you know, just start educating yourself, start reading. The more you equip yourself with, you know, information, the more comfortable you will be when it comes to talking about, you know, all things DEI and in particular about race. You know, race is one thing that a lot of people find quite difficult talking about. You know, I've got a few books here that we have read in our book club. So there's one on race called Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race. That's a really, really good one. And I'm sure a lot of you have actually read it before. Another book we read in the book club all about microaggressions was Subtle Acts of Exclusion, how to understand, identify and stop microaggressions. That's a really, really good one as well. And we've just finished reading Rebel Ideas by Matthew Said, which I found phenomenal. So what I would advise everyone to do is read, educate yourself. It's up to you to educate yourself. And the more you educate yourself, the more equipped you will be at, answering difficult questions, and the more comfortable you will become as well.
Great, thank you very much. And I have a few questions now, some were messaged to me. Should we aim for equality of opportunity or equality of outcome? If any speakers want to answer that.
Equality of opportunity. I just want to kind of come in and just say that we talk about, we roll the words or the letters DEI just roll off our tongues like DEI. And actually, I had a conversation last week with somebody that was, they were a DEI practitioner, but actually not embedding it in their practices. And I actually asked them what it meant, and they couldn't tell me what it meant. And I think that the first starting point really is understanding what D, E, and I is. I'm sure there are people on this call now. And then from there, D, diversity, equity and inclusion, equality of opportunity as opposed to equal opportunity. So really understanding what that means and making sure that you apply it, and then going on to do the research and the history if you're a historian or an explorer looking into the future. But there's only so much of the history that you can bring forward, but understand what those initials stand for and what they really do mean under the surface.
Thank you very much. And next we will have Nagina.
I think it's really important to have, what we want is both. We want equality of opportunity and equality of outcomes, because we can see, and particularly in some of the work that we've been doing at Barnardo's, it's the differential outcomes for children from marginalised groups. But I think one of the mistakes that organisations make is that they think that if they recruit diversely, so they improve workforce diversity, that is going to automatically increase equity and it's going to create inclusion, and that doesn't go hand in hand. So we actually need to think by what do we mean in each organisation around each of these things. What is it that it looks like for us, and what are the things that we are doing to prevent that happening? Because you can bring, somebody raised a point earlier, you can bring more diverse people in, but if they're coming into a toxic environment, they won't thrive, you won't achieve what you need to. And actually, particularly when you have, when you're dealing with service users, and in Barnardo's case, it's children. Actually, how are you transmitting those biases and prejudices in a way that's going to shape their lives? So I think we need both, but we need to be honest with what that means and what we actually want to achieve.
Okay, thank you very much. And Chikure, I think you put your hand up first.
Oh yes, I think I've really answered the question. It was all about educating oneself. I should have put my hands down, sorry.
Oh, great. Grace, we can go with you.
Yeah, so I mean, I just wanted to say that, I agree with Tony on opportunities and kind of point out that I think there's two different problems with opportunities in companies at the moment. I think the first is where we focus a lot on is discrimination. And we ask, are people being discriminated against in a way that's really visible, that can be nailed down? And I think the second is we should be asking, are managers over allocating opportunities to people that are like them? And I think that second part isn't looked at enough, actually. So I think we focus on discrimination and we look for people who are villains, but we don't necessarily take into account the fact that if I am, as somebody who is from Ireland and a white woman, giving too many opportunities to other white women who are from Ireland, that is going to cause outcomes if I'm a gatekeeper for big roles within my company. And I think that's kind of the last bastille to fall is that part, and questioning why people give too many opportunities to people like themselves, and really convincing people actually it's in their worst interests to give opportunities to people like themselves. Because the worst thing I can do for me and my team at the LSE is hire 4 or 5 more Graces. I need different opinions around that table. And I think the value of that, the fact that we still have to build business cases for DEI, suggests we're not where we need to be.
Okay, thanks very much. And I'll just take 2 more answers and then we will have 1 more question. Thanks, everyone. So first of all, we will go with Joanne.
Thank you. I just wanted to share a little bit around the culture of equality, because we're doing quite a bit of work on this at EY. And one of the things that's really important is when we look at it in the three pillars. And when we are talking about the equal outcomes, we've got to be able to have the equitable opportunities first, and actually really understanding that people are at the different starting points. So absolutely, we need to make sure that we have differential investment as and where it's needed. So making sure that you are differentially investing in those groups that are not represented, whether that's through promotion or through experiences and projects. So really making sure that you are ensuring that there is that differential investment. But at the same time, in order to get to this culture of equality, we've got to change the processes and the organisations and the systemic bias that comes in. So it's never about changing minority groups. What it's really about is changing the environment around us. But we've got to recognise that we're not at that stage yet. So there's 2 approaches that we have, which is around this long-term deep cultural change, which is about changing the majority group and the systems and the processes that are set up for and by, largely white men. So we need to make sure that we break that down, but at the same time recognise that until we have that place where it is fair and it is set up in a way that's going to benefit everybody equally, we've got to have a differential investment. So it's a hard balance to keep, but we've got to have both.
Okay, thank you very much. And then finally, Emma.
Hi there, thank you so much. Basically, everything that Joanne said with an extra thought, really, in terms of where you can make really serious impact quickly. And that's when you start to hire, don't hire for where you've been in the past, but try and hire for the skills of the future. So don't hire on experience, hire on perhaps more softer skills, as people have mentioned, like growth mindset, for example, or being future looking. So really analyse that and think about the processes that you hire to.
And the final question then, if anyone wants to answer it, we'll take 2 answers. As recruitment consultants, what advice would you give us dealing with organisations who are slow to embrace DEI? Laura, go ahead.
Well, I think there's a couple of things. When it comes to recruitment, a lot of the time as consultants, people will actually be looking for diverse groups of people, and you'll get a lot of the time, oh, well, they just didn't apply or that kind of thing. I think that you have to make sure that there's not lazy recruitment. So if people are saying to you that, not enough diversity groups applied for the positions, you need to go out to the market and really dig deep. So you need to go to alumni in colleges, you need to go to the disability groups that are there, you need to look at the access programs that are out there. And I know I answered the question kind of the wrong way around, but then I would say if organizations are having a hard time when it comes to diversity hires, they need to be educated. And I would say here in Ireland, I think in Britain, in the UK, they've moved on a little bit further. Here in Ireland, people are fearful. The biggest fear is causing offence, and I mean causing offence at every level. So when it comes to embracing DEI in general, for us here, we understand it and we know a little bit more, but in large companies, even at exec level, they don't understand it. And their biggest fear is causing offence. So I think breaking it down and simplifying issues so that they understand is the way to go. So volunteering, for instance, if you are in a role where you are doing the diversity hiring, getting onto those companies and saying, would you like us to offer some training into you on unconscious bias, on inclusive recruitment, so that you know where to go for these positions?
Okay, thank you. And Donal, we will finish with your answer.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting one, because I think the question there is from somebody who's perhaps working in agency recruitment. And agency recruitment, the recruitment consultant is a fee earner. And we still see from time to time this competing demand where, first of all, the recruiter wants to do their job well and wants to fill the job. And we'll still see very occasionally in the market absolute bias where you'll have a hiring manager occasionally will ask questions that might relate to a candidate's age or a candidate's family status or something like that. The stuff that we would like to think has been left long in the past still permeates occasionally. And that puts the agency recruiter in a position where, you know, they might feel beholden to that client or they might feel subservient to that client. And actually, as agency recruiters, we need to understand that our role is also to educate and to inform and to professionally push back. And if we can't influence change there, that is business that we can do without.
Brilliant, Donal. That brings everything to a conclusion. I'm very happy for everyone who came here today. Thanks. We'll get some final words then from Vincent and also Paul from Techfynder.
Yeah, thank you, Adam, for giving me the opportunity to say a few final words. I mean, I think the main thing that I have to say at this point is that this has been just an amazing learning experience for me. I mean, I've been working in the recruitment field for several years now, also with a focus on DEI, but I still learn something new every day. And I learn a lot on a day like this. So thank you, everybody, also for teaching me new things today. Thank you, everybody who contributed. Thanks, everybody, for attending. Please don't make this just a moment where you learn something for yourself. Share it with the people around you. Try to remember 2 or 3 great things you heard today and tell a friend about it.
Thank you, Vincent and Paul.
Yeah, I suppose it's up to me to wrap it up. So, look, I just want to thank everyone. I went off screen a couple of times because I was writing things down. There's nothing like feedback when you actually see people and you have normal day, everyday conversations, regardless of your location, regardless of anything. There's so many insightful things, stories, just people, their expressions, and it's a really interesting topic that you know, should be more heard of. And I think as a cultural fit and of us all collaborating together, regardless of what our background is, we should be talking about this an awful lot more. And it's nothing to be hidden. We should really be speaking about this an awful lot more. So look, from my perspective, I'm now a consumer instead of being the sponsorship. I was fascinated. So thank you all very much for sharing your stories. I really appreciate that.
Brilliant. Well, thanks again to everyone who came. Thank you to the speakers. I want to say all of them volunteered to come here today. They gave their time. I'm really appreciative of them. And if I said it already, thanks to Vincent for co-hosting the event, and thanks to Techfynder for sponsoring the event and making it possible. Thank you, everyone. We will be in touch after the event. This event was recorded as well, so we're going to have a big clip of all the event. We're going to have lots of mini clips. Thank you so much. Have a nice weekend. Nice Thursday, everything.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you, Adam.
Bye.
Thanks, Vincent.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Great. Really enjoyed it.